Hey guys, Jared here. These are your comments on some of the most incredible survival stories we've covered. And today, I'm going to feature them as I take you through 7 stories of people who survived near-death experiences. I can tell from your comments, some of you would make it out of these situations alive, while others might want to take notes. A 17-year-old stranded in the Amazon for over a week. A hiker attacked by a grizzly not once, but twice on the same day. A crew member trapped in an air pocket 100 feet underwater for 3 days. These are just a few of the unbelievable stories you commented on, and I'll be talking about. None of these people were supposed to make it out alive. I'm gonna tell you how they did. How did a fisherman in Australia survive getting bitten headfirst by a shark? What object ended up saving the life of a garment factory worker buried for 17 days in rubble? And why did one stewardess's medical condition ultimately help to save her life? It's May 26, 2013, and 29-year-old Harrison Okene is getting ready to start his workday as a cook aboard the Jackson 4. This tugboat, carrying 12 workers, including Harrison, is contracted, along with 2 others, to assist a foreign crude oil tanker about 20 miles off Nigeria's coast. Severe weather makes their assistance a necessity. The tanker breaks free from its mooring, and the Jackson 4 and 2 other tugboats jump in to conduct a high-risk emergency tow. For Harrison, breakfast still needs to be made. Wearing only boxers, he makes his way to the bathroom before starting his cooking duties. Then, in the blink of an eye, his world is flipped upside down. Literally. The tugboat's tow rope snaps, and the powerful ocean waves capsize the boat. It starts to sink. Water rushes in quickly, and then the power goes out. As a safety precaution against pirates, the doors on the tugboat are always locked from the inside, leaving some crew members on board stuck inside their cabins. A lucky few are able to get out in time, and as Harrison escapes the bathroom, he sees some of his mates working to open one of the escape hatches. Struggling to catch his breath, Harrison decides to swim away from the hatch. The pressure from the water filling the vessel pushes Harrison into the second engineer's cabin bathroom and slams the door shut behind him. Although he's sitting in an air pocket, he knows he needs to find his way out.
And I was there for a while until the whole vessel got to the seabed, the anchors were dropping, people were shouting, hearing different sounds from different directions, and I was still there.
Harrison tries to open the door, but the water pressure makes it impossible. Over time, the sounds of his mates slowly start to fade. As far as Harrison is concerned, they either managed to escape or drowned. But he doesn't have time to think about that. He needs to find a way out. Rather than panic, he improvises and breaks off a piece of the vent to pry open the door. Then he spots a life jacket and a couple of underwater torches. Harrison uses the torch to guide him to the escape hatch, but can't manage to open it. As he struggles to hold his breath, he makes his way back to resurface in the air pocket.
As I was going back, I almost missed my way. So when I got there, I decided to look for coverers. So I got a coverers and I made the rope out of them.
Using his makeshift rope, Harrison sets a guideline to avoid getting lost in the dark, flooded corridors. Harrison swims back and forth 10 times until he's too cold and tired to continue trying to escape. He creates a raft using torn ceiling panels and a mattress to get the upper half of his body out of the water and reduce the likelihood of suffering from hypothermia. This quick thinking helps Harrison last a little longer, but the challenge to survive is far from over. There's still a risk of carbon dioxide poisoning, starvation, dehydration, and of course, ocean predators. Whether he knows it or not, the turbulent water splashing around absorbs most of the carbon dioxide, which allows him to continue breathing safely. The one thing he can't avoid is the ocean predators. As he sits and waits to be rescued, he feels crayfish feasting on his legs. But that's nothing compared to the sounds of what he assumes are sharks or barracudas swimming in and out of the tugboat, possibly consuming the bodies of his crewmates. Out of caution, Harrison arms himself with a wooden plank to fight off any large predators that may come for him next. What Harrison doesn't know is that a recovery mission for the bodies of the entire crew is underway. As far as everyone is concerned, Harrison is dead. But that all changes when Harrison spots a rescue diver. They're shocked.
When he turned, I was waving my left hand for him. So when he saw me, he has to stretch his hand across to me.
He's alive, he's alive. Okay, keep him there.
In total, Harrison was stuck underwater for 60 hours and needed to spend another 60 hours in a recompression chamber before returning to the surface. Medical tests determined that, all things considered, Harrison was in good physical health. A true miracle, as he was the only survivor. Mentally, the toll of what he had gone through weighed on him. But that all changed a year later, when he was driving to work with a friend, and their car went off a bridge and into a body of water. Harrison managed to escape, but his friend was still in the car, so he went back down to rescue him. They both managed to get out, injury-free.
I have to kill the fear inside of me. But there's something I like doing in my life because I've seen and I've understand that fear stops a lot of people to get into a particular level of life they want to get to.
He's since gone on to become a certified diver, working alongside the men who orchestrated his rescue in May 2013. Talk about a full circle moment. On the subject of divers, our next story is about a single survivor who should never have been put in such a dangerous position to begin with. And you guys were very vocal about who should have been held responsible. The Peria divers were left to die because it's easier to sweep a scandal under the rug if most of the people involved in the incident aren't able to testify. Them dying down there was intentional. Can't say I disagree with that one. That company should be instantly shut down and liquidated, and whoever made the call to leave them should get life in prison. There was some legal things that took place, but definitely not life in prison for those responsible. That wasn't a failure, but flat refusal by the employer. The sad reality is that an oversight led to the initial accident, but the divers in this story could have been rescued. 5 men went to work and only 1 came home. This is the story of the Peria diving incident.
I tell him, I say, boy, them fellas in there, let's go and save them. And she was like, all right, but you relax. I said, don't tell me to relax. What, better let me go back and save them.
On February 25th, 2022, 5 divers entered the waters off Trinidad and Tobago to repair a leaking U-shaped oil pipeline 60 feet deep and 1,200 feet long. The state-owned pipeline belonging to Pariah Fuel Trading Company connected Berth 5 and Berth 6, which are loading docks where oil tankers receive or discharge fuel. The divers, Christopher Boodram, Kazim Ali Jr., Yusuf Henry, Rishi Nagasser, and Faisal Kurban worked for LMCS, which Pariah had contracted to repair the pipe near Berth 6. An 8-foot by 8-foot air-filled chamber enabled divers to work in a dry environment, even though they were 15 feet underwater. Everything was fine, until the team removed an inflatable plug used to prevent oil and gas from escaping. What the team didn't know was that the pipe had been drained weeks earlier, leading to a pressure differential. When they removed the inflatable plug, the pipeline acted as a vacuum, quickly sucking up seawater and the divers into the 30-inch diameter pipe. Battered around and dragged 700 feet, all 5 of the injured divers finally came to a stop. At least 2 were suffering from broken bones, low on oxygen, and covered in oil. Nagasser was too injured to move. The other 4 divers managed to link together, forming a human chain, tucking their feet under the person's shoulders in front of them. At the front of the chain was Boodram, who wasn't as severely injured as his colleagues. As they started making their way up the pipeline, they found 2 oxygen tanks that had been sucked through and shared them. Once they reached the end of an air pocket, Boodram swam ahead to see how far it was until the pipeline curved, an area called the elbow. When he got there, he realized the water wasn't high enough for him to get himself out, so he screamed for help. Fortunately, his screams were heard, and 2 divers came down to pull him up. Boodram told the rescue team his friends were still alive, but badly injured. Volunteer divers were ready to attempt a rescue, but the company in charge stopped them, citing safety concerns.
LMCS stated that it was prevented from conducting such a rescue in the pipeline by Pariah, notwithstanding that LMCS had divers and equipment available to conduct the rescue.
After assessing the situation, the Coast Guard decided the rescue mission was too risky. but the volunteer divers attempted to enter the pipe anyway. They were stopped by armed guards who claimed that Pariah had stated that no one else was allowed in. Pariah then decided to try using cameras to see where the men were stuck. At this point, they had been trapped for 9 hours. Despite Pariah telling the families of the men that they were doing everything they could to rescue them, it was only a matter of time before things would turn grim, and they'd die due to a lack of oxygen. Desperate to be saved, the trapped divers continued to bang on the pipes, alerting any potential rescue divers that they were still alive. Sadly, help was never going to come. A press conference was held 48 hours after the incident, and Pariah announced publicly that the operation had turned into a recovery mission. The 4 divers' bodies were recovered over the next few days, with an autopsy revealing one of the men may have lived for up to 39 hours before passing. This is another situation where negligence led to the untimely death of experienced workers. Had the team known that the pipeline was empty, they likely would have approached the task differently. Sometimes survival simply isn't possible. The fact that our next survivor made it out alive after what she went through, according to a lot of you, was nothing short of a miracle. Surviving a 10,000-foot fall and surviving a deadly Amazon, true definition of wasn't your time to go. Incredible lady and family. Her mother was amazing, her parents taught her well. Her survival was next to miraculous. What an incredibly brave and resourceful young woman. This is such a tragic story, but she is absolutely inspiring. I can't argue with you guys, you're 100% right on the money. Unbelievable. Surviving a plane crash is one thing, but then trekking through the Amazon for over a week alone with nothing but the clothes on your back at 17 years old? Look, I may be the survival guy, but I've got nothing on Julianne Koepka. This is her unbelievable story. On Christmas Eve, 1971, Julianne and her mother boarded LANSA Flight 508 from Lima to Pucallpa. Just over 25 minutes into their flight, they hit heavy turbulence. They were flying headfirst into a storm. And then, in a flash of lightning, everything changed.
At that moment, my mother screamed, "This is the end." And exactly what happened after that, I can't say.
What Julianne didn't know in those final seconds was that the aircraft wasn't simply going down. The fuselage had begun to tear itself apart mid-air, scattering passengers and debris across 9 square miles of jungle, while the plane was still airborne.
This machine was like a toy in the clutches of a furious, unleashed nature.
And then, she was no longer inside it.
And then, all of a sudden, I was outside the plane. I was suspended in midair, still in my seat. It was not so much that I had left the plane, but rather that the plane had left me.
Julianne began free-falling toward the densest jungle on Earth. Her mother was no longer by her side.
The only sound I heard was the wind howling in my ears, and the forest was spinning below me.
Now, you may be thinking to yourself, how the hell did she survive a fall like this? Well, it was a bit of physics and a lot of luck.
But I had no time to be afraid, because apparently I lost consciousness.
Experts believe the row of seats she was strapped to spun around like a helicopter, providing some air resistance. And the warm updraft from the storm may have slowed her descent. But the trees also played a big part.
The descent through the canopy and the understory saved her ass. And she probably would have died on impact if she landed with the seat directly on the end.
I fell through this thicket and then, relatively softly, quote-unquote, struck the ground.
The wild thing is, Julianne wasn't the only survivor of the crash. Well, at least initially. We'll get to what happened to the rest of the passengers later on in the episode.
I suffered a very serious concussion. I couldn't raise myself without fading away again.
Julianne was in pretty bad shape. Her left eye was swollen shut. She had deep cuts on her arms and legs, and a broken clavicle. But that's not all.
As I learned later, I also had a torn ligament in my left knee. I had no idea. Later, doctors in Germany said that wasn't possible. You can't walk with that injury. I was completely unaware that I had it. There was no pain at all.
When your body goes into survival mode, adrenaline kicks in. It can help suppress pain and even increase your strength and endurance. And for Julianne, it kept her moving. But she had no glasses, leaving her nearly blind. One sandal, a thin mini dress, and an Amazon rainforest that was already working to kill her. She could hear planes in the distance. A search team, maybe. But the jungle canopy made it impossible to see anything from above. No signal fires were possible either. The rain had soaked everything. She was on her own.
There's nothing to eat. There's no shelter. Everything wants to eat you. Your hypothermia sets in. For people who don't know anything about the jungle, it's the same damn thing. You might as well be dropped off in the middle of the ocean, because there's nothing for you there. Nothing at all.
Now, you may be thinking, hypothermia? I thought the jungle was hot and humid.
If it's not raining, if you don't have any way to keep your heat in at night, you can go into hypothermia in the forest. There's so much humidity in the air that it's basically like you're swimming. So even if it's not raining, you are in direct contact with a soup, and that soup is going to sap your heat out. So hypothermia is possible in the jungle as well. And it's really surprising she didn't get hypothermia.
To stay hydrated, Julianne licked droplets off leaves until she found a muddy stream. Delicious. And now, muddy streams like this can carry pathogens and diseases, but it was a risk she was willing to take.
If you get sick, you're gonna have a hard time. You're gonna get weak and maybe even succumb to some illness to the point where you can't even walk.
Although her next obstacle was finding food, she had other priorities in mind. Finding her mother. As she moved through the jungle, she found some debris from the plane. She came across a bag of candies and a Christmas cake covered in mud. She tried to eat the cake, but was so disgusted by it, she tossed it away. Yeah, I don't blame her. I mean, I've never been a fruitcake guy myself. At one point, she came face to face with a bird-eating spider. A spider that eats birds. They looked at each other and went their separate ways. Now, thankfully, this variety wasn't dangerous to humans, but guys, I would have completely lost it. The Amazon is full of fruits and animals, but without her glasses, well, distinguishing safe from deadly was next to impossible. One wrong move is a death sentence, and Julianne would come terrifyingly close to that later. As time dragged on, she still couldn't find her mother. She knew she had a tough decision to make. Keep looking or find help. She continued hearing planes overhead and made a game plan. Rather than stay by the wreckage where she was covered by dense foliage, she decided to follow the sounds of trickling water. She remembered the advice her father told her when she was a child.
Here I have learned how important it is to find water if you are lost in the jungle. A small creek leads to a larger one, which eventually takes you to a river where you can find human habitation and help.
She came across a small stream. If it led to a river, it would be her best chance of being seen. She had one thing on her mind: getting out as soon as possible. Sadly, the planes never saw her. After a few days, they stopped searching altogether. Still, Julianne didn't give up hope. She managed to get by, one day at a time, but it wasn't easy.
Nights were the most difficult. It either rained ice cold or I was bitten to pieces by mosquitoes.
In an effort to stay warm and dry, Julianne used large leaves to cover herself and sought shelter under thick tree trunks or along slopes.
There were often times I wanted to give up, but I continued on regardless.
To avoid accidentally stepping on a snake barefoot, Julianne led with her one sandal. At least that way she had some protection. Or did she?
No matter what boots or snake chaps you have on, if you are in the wrong situation, you manage to piss that snake off and get bit, it's gonna bite above your waist anyways. So your foot is nothing.
And it wasn't just the animals she needed to worry about while navigating through the jungle.
Although you gotta really use your eyes and watch where you're walking. Aside from that, you're stepping on spiny palms. Everything that grows there has some sort of defense to keep things from hurting it, climbing on it, eating it, and it's usually in the form of spines or poison.
At one point, she considered catching a frog to eat. It was the rainy season, and she knew there were poisonous dart frogs everywhere. They could make her really sick, but not enough to kill her, like the golden poison dart frogs native to Colombia. Still, they were too fast for her to catch, and it's probably a good thing too. On day 4, she heard vultures and saw them circling overhead. In her childhood, her mother, who was an ornithologist, taught her all about the birds of the jungle, and she knew exactly what this meant. The birds led her to 3 passengers, still strapped into their seats, driven headfirst into the ground with such force that half of each body was buried in the dirt. At first, Julianne was afraid one of the victims was her mother.
And I turned one of the feet over and saw that the toenails were painted. And it then became clear to me that this could not possibly be my mother, because she never painted her toenails.
The Amazon is a death sentence for most people, but thankfully for Julianne, it was like a second home. Her parents were zoologists. At 14, her family relocated to the Peruvian jungle to conduct research. She grew up alongside caimans, vampire bats, poisonous spiders, and venomous snakes. But here's where this story stops being a tragedy and starts being something else entirely. It never should have happened. In the years before Christmas Eve 1971, Lanza had already been responsible for 2 separate fatal crashes. And yet, the Peruvian government kept its operating license active. Locals had a saying. It translated roughly to, Lanza lands on its belly. Julianne's own father refused to let them book the flight. He knew the reputation, but with no other options available, they boarded anyway. 92 people. An airline with 2 fatal crashes on its record, and a government that looked the other way. That's not bad luck. That's a decision someone made. And 91 people paid for it. Now, before we go further, if this is the kind of story you're here for, make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell. On day 5 or 6, Julianne heard the sounds of birds yet again. But these weren't vultures. It was the call of the Hoatzin, a chicken-like bird native to the Amazon which lives along bodies of water. She followed their calls and came across a large river. Although she had found water, the dangers that lurked beneath were also something she knew she had to be cautious of. So she entered the river and started moving, but this was not a casual swim.
In the water we have electric eels, who are territorial and aggressive. We have piranhas, we have anacondas, we have caimans. The anacondas and caimans would definitely look at you as a meal if they were big enough.
I always carried a stick and poked the river bottom ahead of me because there are a lot of poisonous stingrays in the muddy shallows of the river. Stingrays are the really dangerous animals of the jungle, of these rivers. Much more dangerous than the poisonous snakes, jaguars, and tarantulas, which people generally fear.
And if you're wondering about piranhas, they're only dangerous in standing water, so they weren't really a concern for Julianne. At one point, she heard the cries of baby caimans. Then she saw the mother, rising from the bank, moving toward her. Rather than panic, she slowly slid back into the water and held still, showing she wasn't a threat. The caiman stopped. It worked. Now, these were likely spectacled caimans, a less dangerous variety.
Black caimans are the ones that can get 14 feet long, and they look at humans as food. The spectacle caimans will max out around 8 feet, and they're not going to really see a large human towering over as a prey item.
Still, Julianne's instinct to stay calm and back away slowly is likely what led her to avoid a serious confrontation with the mother caiman. Each day, she continued to float down the river and would go to shore at sunset to rest, but sleeping was impossible due to the pain she started to feel from the insects feasting on her wounds.
I had a wound on the back of my left upper arm, where flies had deposited their eggs.
At risk of blood disease or losing her arm due to other forms of bacteria and parasites, Julianne knew she didn't have much time. And the second-degree sunburns she suffered while wading through the river all day added insult to injury. After several more days, she rested on a gravel bank. Things weren't looking good. And then she saw a boat. She thought she was hallucinating.
I slowly approached it and touched the boat, and it was real. At this moment, I became wide awake, looked around. Where are the owners? There was no one there.
Julianne crawled up the riverbank on all fours. It took her hours. And then she saw a small hut. Although no one was inside, she was certain it was only a matter of time before someone returned. She remembered a trick her father used on a wounded dog. She found gasoline from the boat's engine and poured it directly into her cut. One by one, the maggots surfaced.
In total, there were 50 maggots, each about 1 centimeter long in my arm. Amazing. I managed to pull out around 30 myself.
She grabbed a tarp, laid down on the sandy riverbank, and later wrote it was a better sleep than any 5-star hotel. By the morning, there was still no sign of anyone coming to the camp. Julianne came to terms with the fact that she may die here without anyone knowing what happened to her. And then, she heard voices. It was 3 forest workers, Beltran Paredes, Carlos Vasquez, and Nestor Amasifuen, who, by chance, decided to go back to their shelter.
That became my rescue. They told me later that they hadn't intended to go there at all. They just checked on their boat every 3 weeks.
Wow. Talk about lucky. They cleaned her wounds and removed the remaining maggots, fed her, and took her on an 11-hour boat ride back towards civilization. Julianne asked about the other survivors. The men went quiet. No living passengers had been found. She was the only one. This confirmed her worst fear. Her mother was gone. As they reached civilization, local villagers were taken aback by her blonde hair and bloodshot eyes.
They mistook me for a water spirit. There is a legendary figure called Yakumama, the Water Mother.
But her journey alone had finally come to an end. She was then flown to a missionary hospital where she recovered for months. But she still needed closure about her mother. Julianne directed search teams to the crash site. On January 7th, 1972, they found the first pieces of wreckage. The next day, they uncovered more aircraft debris and 20 corpses. But the full story of what happened to the passengers of Lanza Flight 508 is darker than the crash itself. Forensic analysis of the bodies recovered from the jungle told investigators something devastating. Julianne wasn't the only person to survive the initial impact. Multiple passengers had survived the fall. They were alive, conscious, and waiting in the jungle. But they reached them too late. On January 12th, Julianne's mother was finally identified by her father, despite serious injuries to her face. He knew it was her by her distinct feet. Forensic investigators believed she, along with at least 11 others, survived the crash, only to die in the jungle over the following days. Years later, Julianne teamed up with filmmaker Werner Herzog to make Wings of Hope, a film she credited with helping her overcome her trauma. Believe it or not, Werner almost got on the same flight as Julianne while filming 1972's Aguirre, The Wrath of God, but a last-minute cancellation kept him back.
I was booked on this plane, that's why it's important for me. And by a chain of coincidences, I was taken off the passenger list.
Now, Julianne didn't run from the jungle after this. She returned to it. She earned her doctorate in biology, became a mammalogist specializing in bats, and spent her career researching the Amazon rainforest. The place that should have killed her became her life's work. Survival isn't just about instinct. It's about preparation, knowledge, and as Anthony reminded us, the mental clarity to assess your situation before anything else. If you were in a situation like hers, you were badly hurt in the middle of the jungle, no form of communication, no tech, no cell phone, nothing like that, what's the first thing that you would do to increase the odds of your survival?
Orient myself, not only physically, but psychologically to what you need to do to get out, do a general check on how healthy and capable you are of even doing that.
Someone fell 10,000 feet out of the sky and managed to survive. That's insane. What's even more insane is that someone else tripled that distance and survived a fall from over 30,000 feet. And that same word kept popping up in the comments: miracle. No amount of explanation is needed. No matter how many words you use to explain how she survived, just be honest with yourself and call it what it is: a miracle. Bloody miracle, surviving the fall, receiving aid by a medic, and recovered from paralysis. Yes, miracle is part of it, but we can't ignore the part will plays to survive. This is the story of Vesna Vulović, a flight attendant who survived the highest fall ever recorded after a bomb exploded and destroyed the plane she wasn't supposed to be on in the first place.
I remember another hour of flight. Then my life was interrupted.
I do not know how it is possible. I myself do not know how it is possible to survive all of that, let alone a fall from 100 meters. It's impossible to survive that height.
It's January 26, 1972. 22-year-old stewardess Vesna Vulović is handing out snacks to passengers on a Yugoslav Airlines flight to Belgrade. They're high above the clouds, cruising at a breezy altitude of 33,000 feet. Just another run-of-the-mill flight, until suddenly, her life literally gets flipped upside down. An explosion rips the plane into 3 pieces. Everyone gets sucked out into the open air, except for Vesna. She's pinned inside the tail end of the plane by her food cart, an object that ultimately would save her life, and plummets toward the snowy hills below. And then, she's out cold. Vesna would become the Guinness World Record holder for the longest fall ever survived by a human being without a parachute. But she's not the only one who's cheated death from a great height. We'll unpack her insane story of survival and 2 others that may make you reconsider flying and skydiving. Yeah, I will not be doing that, ever. I don't care how much you guys pay me. What caused Vesna's plane to explode in the first place? How did a skydiver who fell 4,000 feet uncover it was an attempted murder plot? And what saved the life of a World War II US airman who was thrown from his aircraft at 20,000 feet? We had the pleasure of welcoming back aviation accident investigator, pilot, and certified flight instructor Melanie A. Fulsick-Barolero to the show. We spoke with her to get her perspective on Vesna's incredible survival story, among others.
When an aircraft does break up even further, we have in-flight breakup, and that really does send parts of the aircraft everywhere.
This is the incredible story of Vesna Vulović and others like her who defied gravity and walked away alive. For Vesna, becoming a flight attendant is a dream come true, an opportunity to travel to different parts of the world and get paid for it. It's also an opportunity for her to visit London, England, and see her favorite band, the Beatles. I mean, can you blame her? The Beatles are amazing. But a medical issue almost keeps her from landing the job in the first place. With chronically low blood pressure, she doesn't qualify on her medical exam to become a flight attendant, but she cheats the system. Prior to the exam, she drinks a ton of coffee and passes the test. Wow, it's that easy, huh? Wonder if it works for drug tests. Little does she know that her medical condition will end up saving her life. She's 8 months into her job for Yugoslav Airlines when she's scheduled for flight 367 from Stockholm to Belgrade. But the crazy part of this story? She isn't even supposed to be on this flight.
Instead of my colleague, Vesna Nikolic, they signed me Vesna Vulović by mistake. I was told I was taken off the flight I was meant to work.
The plane lands at a layover in Copenhagen around 2:30 p.m. Before Vesna and her colleagues board, they watch the passengers and crew deplane. One passenger in particular stands out to them. A man who seems very annoyed as he gets off.
And then it seemed to me that one passenger did not go with the other passengers to the exit, but that he went to the other side, there to the end of the tube. And that really stuck in my memory, and I said that.
Turns out, this is the same man Vesna believes is responsible for planting an explosive suitcase on the plane she is moments away from boarding.
I remember the women who entered the cabin with children and the cleaners who had been tidying up before that.
At 3:15 p.m., the plane takes off. It reaches a cruising altitude of 33,330 feet as it flies over the Czech village of Srpska Kamenica. Things are going as expected.
I remember another hour of flight. Then my life was interrupted.
At 4:01 p.m., an explosion detonates in the baggage compartment below. The plane separates into 3 parts, causing the cabin to rapidly depressurize. Within seconds, debris, luggage, and 27 passengers and crew members are sucked out of the plane and scattered across the Czech mountains.
When an aircraft does break up even further, we have in-flight breakup, and that really does send parts of the aircraft everywhere. So depending on the speed, the force, the velocity, and the trajectory of the aircraft, the heavier parts tend to move forward. So we will see parts ahead of where the explosion happened, travel for miles, and lighter pieces can actually float down in a leaf effect.
But Vesna remains trapped inside a broken part of the fuselage, pinned by a food trolley, while it plummets to the ground.
There was probably a spiral effect, as there usually is, given the wind moving through the air in general. So in this case, I think it probably tail ended up down, and she was probably sitting in it like a cup.
She passes out almost immediately due to her low blood pressure. But this is actually a blessing in disguise.
She had such wonderful luck that this particular piece of the plane was falling down in a special way. It was spinning, as the Czechs who saw it on the spot told me. They watched it fall.
The fuselage of the plane slams into the dense snow-covered trees at just the right angle. A hilly slope cushions the fall.
You can't force your blood pressure to go in one way or another, so let's take that off the table. You're not going to be popping a magic pill that does that. However, you have the ability to go limp. If you tense up, you have a higher chance of ripping muscle, breaking bones, and injuring yourself because your body tenses the muscles.
So, I guess what's the most ideal situation to fall into if you're falling out of the sky?
Anything frangible that could break and absorb the energy. We want them to hit tree branches all the way down. Now, it's not going to protect you from broken bones and internal injuries, but your survival is higher at that point, especially like her, if she was wrapped in any kind of part from the aircraft like fuselage, tail, baggage car.
Vesna's rudely awakened by the impact. The crash leaves her with a fractured skull and pelvis, 3 broken ribs, 2 broken legs, and spinal damage, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. Vesna screams out in pain. Thankfully, a nearby villager is in earshot. Bruno Honke, who was a former World War II field medic, runs over to help. Talk about having the right guy in the right place at the right time. Honke rushes into action, dressing Vesna's wounds and keeping her breathing until additional help arrives. Now let's be real, guys. Surviving a crash like this is 1 in a million, but there are precautions you can take to improve your chances. If you ever find yourself in a plane going down, your instinct to jump out could kill you. You're better off getting into the brace position and hoping for the best. Unless, of course, you happen to be wearing a parachute, but even those can fail. You'll see what I mean. The most important thing you can do is protect your head, even if it means the rest of your body will take the majority of the damage.
We always say don't take that last breath before you impact the ground. You want to take it and then release it.
For Vesna, her injuries are so severe that even after getting to the hospital, doctors aren't sure how long she can last. Before we talk about Vesna's recovery, if you're enjoying the video so far, we'd really appreciate a like or comment. And if you want more stories like Vesna's, be sure to subscribe as well. We've got plenty more on the way.
I only learned that this year from my doctor who saved me. I was dead for 4 hours, clinically dead, and woke up on St. Sava's Day. It is a miracle you survived.
Vesna's in a coma for several weeks. When she comes to, she has no memory of what happened during the fall due to amnesia.
And I don't remember. I woke up every day asking where I was and what was happening.
After surviving the impossible, Vesna defies all odds once again when, 10 months later, she begins to walk. Because she has no memory of what happened, Vesna is actually eager to start working as a flight attendant once she's fully healed. But the airline she works for doesn't think it's such a good idea. As Vesna's story continues to gain media attention, Yugoslav Airlines doesn't like the publicity it's getting because of the accident, so they give her a desk job instead. But the media isn't just interested in Vesna. The investigation uncovers that a briefcase carrying explosives was planted in the baggage compartment, and the manhunt for who planted it begins.
You said that you noticed a man at the airport who did not board, who was late, and who left his suitcases behind.
The day after the crash, a Swedish newspaper reports a Croatian nationalist calls in claiming responsibility. Authorities also suspect a Croatian terrorist group known as the Ustaše is responsible, although no one is ever formally charged. And nowadays, thankfully, airport security is much more strict, so a briefcase bomb is the least of your concerns.
And passengers have a say too. If you look out the window while your aircraft is getting loaded with cargo and there's something strange and you don't like it, you are more than welcome to bring that up as a concern, and they will bring out the right people, whether it's customs, airport security, to look into that package more.
In 1985, Vesna is awarded the Guinness World Record for the highest fall survived without a parachute. And she's presented with the award by one of the 4 men responsible for her becoming a flight attendant in the first place, Paul McCartney of the Beatles. Talk about a full circle moment. You know, come to think of it, they should have renamed the song Vesna in the Sky with Diamonds. Despite the happy ending, Vesna suffered from survivor's guilt. While she didn't become a flight attendant again, and frankly I don't blame her, she did use her fame to fight for democracy as a political activist.
Seriously, I remained the same Vesna I was. My life just went in a different direction.
Vesna passed away on December 23, 2016 at 66 years old. But the Guinness World Record will likely remain hers forever. At least, I hope so. If you haven't noticed by now, the survivors in each of these stories share the ability to stay calm under pressure. And that's exactly what you should do when you encounter an animal out in the wild. Sometimes it's easier said than done. And although we originally called our video about Todd Orr, who was attacked by a grizzly bear twice, a tragedy, many of you were quick to chime in that it was no tragedy at all. Don't know if I would call this a tragedy. Fighting a bear and losing is death. I would call surviving this a victory. Tragedy? This is awesome. It sucks he had to go through this, but what a triumph to say he survived the ordeal. I'll take your feedback. You guys are right. Todd's experience is truly an incredible story of resilience. If this is your first time hearing about Todd's fight for survival, let me know your thoughts on this one down below. Being attacked by a grizzly is rare, but being attacked by the same grizzly twice in one day is exceptionally rare. For outdoorsman Todd Orr, it's something he never would have imagined happening to him well out on his morning hike. What started as a beautiful stroll in the Montana mountains quickly turned into a bloody, living nightmare.
And immediately she was on top of me, and I just went down on my face and wrapped my arms around the back of my neck and head to protect my body and kind of curled up in a ball face down.
But this would just be the start of what would turn into an unbelievable survival story. Just when he thought he'd made it out of the woods alive, the bear came back for seconds.
At the last second, I thought I heard something, started to turn, and here she was again, just 10 or 15 feet behind me and coming wide open. I didn't have time to, had bear spray in my hand, I had a pistol here, I didn't have time to use either one. She hit me from behind, knocked me right in the dirt on my face. Her first bite was in my left arm, and it broke the ulna bone and ripped a bunch of tendons and muscle out.
Why was the grizzly hunting him? What should you do if your bear spray doesn't work? And what ultimately saved Todd's life? Before we tear into this one, make sure to like and subscribe for more amazing survival stories.
My name is Todd Orr. I'm a trails engineer with the Forest Service, and I'm also a custom knife maker and owner of Skyblade Knives.
Todd lives in Montana, known as Big Sky Country. It's home to hundreds of species of animals, notably moose, mountain goats, bison, and you guessed it, bears. In fact, the official animal of Montana is the grizzly bear. Fatal grizzly attacks are rare, but they do happen. Since 2020, there have been a little over a dozen in North America. We're responsible for over 71% of deaths by grizzlies, often because our curiosity gets the best of us. But even for an experienced outdoorsman like Todd, there's always a risk of being attacked, no matter how safe you think you are. And in 2016, his life would change forever.
It was October 1st, a blue sky fall day, and I just wanted to get outside and do some hiking and look for some animals up in the mountains. So I got to the trailhead about 2 hours before daylight and spent an hour and a half hiking in the dark, and I wanted to be up as high as I could in the mountains right at daylight. And right before daylight, I stepped out into this meadow, and there was a sow grizzly and two young cubs about 100 yards away, and we saw each other at the same time. And that sow just turned and ran up the trail and over the ridge. And I thought, this is a good bear, she's gone, she doesn't like humans. So I was gonna wait a couple minutes and then continue in the opposite direction. And I took a few steps and heard something behind me, and I turned, and this sow had dropped her cubs and circled around probably to get my wind, and then she came right in as a charge off the ridge and just wide open down the hill, 35, 40 miles an hour. And the brush was just flying. She had her ears laid back, she's low to the ground, just a full attack charge. And I just instinctively reached down, grabbed my bear spray, pulled out the safety clip, and looked back up, and she was at like 30 feet coming wide open still. So I just gave her a full blast of bear spray and kind of stepped back, and just her momentum carried her right through that bear spray.
When packing for any outing in the forest, bear spray should always be at the top of your list. But having bear spray handy and knowing how to use it are two different things. First things first, You always want to make sure you have your spray at the ready. I recommend having it in a holster so that in a situation like Todd's, you're ready to defend yourself instantly. It'd be a shame if your spray was tucked away somewhere in your bag while a grizzly was charging toward you. You also need to know how to aim the bear spray. If you're taller than a charging bear, shooting the spray in front of you with your arm extended won't help much. Instead, lower the can at an angle towards the bear's face and fire away. Even if the bear is not directly in front of you, the lingering spray may still be effective. Start with a 1-second burst of the spray and continue with that pattern until the bear retreats. Statistics show that bear spray works more than 90% of the time, but it didn't seem to help in Todd's case. Or did it?
Bear spray doesn't always work, but it's better than nothing. Immediately she was on top of me, and I just went down on my face and wrapped my arms around the back of my neck and head to protect my body and kind of curled up in a ball face down. And she bit me 4 or 5 times on my right arm and shoulder, and then she started coughing from that bear spray, and then she just took off. That quick, she was gone. So it only lasted a few seconds, but I had a number of puncture wounds and kind of like, wow, I just survived a grizzly bear attack.
If you're ever attacked by a grizzly, playing dead, laying face down, and covering your neck is your safest move. This increases your chance of survival, as one swipe or bite of your neck could lead to a quick death. And it's not a good idea to fight back, as this will likely cause the grizzly to attack more aggressively. However, there are some exceptions. If the bear is persistently attacking and not letting up, you eventually need to fight back. These situations may be rare, but they do happen. Aim for the bear's face, hitting it with whatever you can find. Of course, if you can get your bear spray off before the attack, you'll want to do that. It's likely what saved Todd's life, at least after the first attack.
I picked myself up and said, all right, I need to go to the hospital and get some stitches. So I started down the trail, and maybe 5 minutes later, there's a stream I had to cross, and I was just about to walk across the creek, and it was pretty loud. And at the last second, I thought I heard something, started to turn, and here she was again, just 10 or 15 feet behind me and coming wide open. I didn't have time to, had bear spray in my hand, I had a pistol here, I didn't have time to use either one. She hit me from behind, knocked me right in the dirt on my face, and just curled up in a ball again, trying to protect the back of my head and my vitals. Her first bite was in my left arm, and it broke the ulna bone and ripped a bunch of tendons and muscle out. And that kind of made me wince, and I was like, made a noise, and that just turned her into a frenzy. And she just started picking me up, grabbed me by the backpack or my shoulder, picked me up, shake me like a rag doll, and then toss me to the side. And I'd roll over here 20 feet out of the way, and I'd just roll face down again and back into that position to try to protect myself. And immediately she'd be back on top of me and biting and trashing on me again and throwing me around, and just lasted for a couple minutes, and then she kind of stopped. And maybe the eeriest part of the whole situation was I'm curled up in a ball face down, and she's got her claws pinned in my lower back and all of her weight on me, and I'm trying not to make a sound, just trying to play dead. And she's sniffing the back of my neck, and I can smell her, and I can, out of the corner of my eye, I can see her eye and her head right here at one point. And she would sniff and then kind of nip on me and bite me, and just testing to see if I was still a threat or if I was incapacitated or dead. And finally, I guess she decided I wasn't a threat anymore, and she stepped off and disappeared.
So Todd survived the first attack thanks to his bear spray, but why did the bear just leave him after the second attack? There could be multiple reasons, but the most likely would be that the bear either felt Todd was no longer a threat, or that the mama grizzly left to bring her cubs over for a feast. Grizzlies don't usually see humans as prey, so the reason for the initial attack was likely to keep her cubs safe. Once Todd started moving after the first attack was over, the grizzly, now in a heightened state of mind, likely picked up his scent or heard him nearby. So she likely came back to finish what she started.
And so I'm laying there, and my face is all bloody from the ripped open scalp and tendons sticking out of my arm, and I'm afraid to move because I don't know where she is for sure. Finally, I thought, well, If she comes back again and attacks me a third time, then I'm probably not going to survive this, so I need to get out of here. And so I slowly reached my arm up and kind of wiped the blood out of my face and my eyes and looked both directions. And I didn't see her anywhere, but my pistol was laying over there in the dirt, so it had been ripped off of my body. So I kind of dove for the pistol, hammer back, ready just in case. She was gone. So I picked everything up. This arm was useless. The tendons were tore out. My wrist was all curled over and cramped. So I tucked the pistol in my armpit, bear spray in this hand, and started hiking down the trail. Just had 4 miles to go. So after maybe 15 minutes of hiking, I was thinking about, how are the wounds? Do I need to put a tourniquet on or bandaging? Do I have severed artery or something? I'm going to bleed to death before I get to the truck. So I stopped and checked my body over, and everything looked okay. I had a lot of puncture wounds and cuts, but nothing bleeding profusely. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to bleed to death. Keep going to the truck. You need to get out of here. Get to safety.
In a perfect bear attack scenario, you'd want to have a first aid kit with you, but that's not always the case. What could you do if you were in Todd's situation, alone, without any bandages or wraps? Depending on how severely injured you are, you'd want to use a piece of your clothing, whether it be a shirt or the legs of your pants, to bandage yourself or use as a tourniquet. This will help stop or reduce your bleeding and significantly increase your chances of getting to safety. Luckily, Todd was still mobile after the attack. However, if you're too injured to move, how could you signal for help? Your cell phone is your best bet, assuming you have service. A whistle or flare could also get someone's attention. A mirror can be a good light signal, using the sun's reflection to your advantage. And if all else fails, start yelling for help.
Just had a grizzly with 2 cubs come at me from about 80 yards, and I sprayed the shit out of her with bear spray. I think I stopped one more time and just kind of checked my body, and I was very aware of what was going on around me and just making sure that I was going to get out of there alive. 4 miles later, got to the truck, and first thing I thought about was I need to put a note on the bulletin board and just let other people that might be coming up here hiking that there's an aggressive grizzly with cubs in the area. So I'm in my truck trying to get a sticky note out and a pen and trying to write a note, and just blood dripping off the end of the pen. You couldn't read it. It was worthless. So I gave up on that idea. She got my head good. Took a quick video and a couple photos of my wounds and started driving down the road. I had about a 45-minute drive to get to town to the hospital. There was a sheriff's officer and a doctor and a nurse that were just standing out front there waiting for me, and I pulled up, and it's been a couple hours since the attack now, so all the wounds were, my muscles were stiff and just couldn't even reach to get my seatbelt off or to put my truck in park. So the sheriff's officer came over and opened the door and got in and got the truck in park, got my seatbelt undone, and he mentioned, he's like, I'm surprised you took the time to buckle up. And I was like, well, I just survived 2 grizzly bear attacks. I don't want to die in a car wreck because I didn't have a seatbelt on. Then I walked into the hospital, and everybody was kind of lined up along the corridor wanted to see what a bear attack victim looked like. And first thing they did is get x-rays of my arm to find out I had a broken ulna bone. And then they spent the next 7 hours doing stitches.
Todd was left with a broken forearm and went through months of physical therapy to get strength back in his left hand. Besides that, he now has a 5-inch scar on the side of his head. He was given antibiotics to prevent infection and opted not to take pain medication. We asked Todd what he thought was the most important thing to know when traveling in bear country.
Well, if you're out there in bear country or anywhere in the outdoors with wild animals, if possible, hike with 2 or more people. You just have less chance of being attacked by an animal. And if you do have an injury, you've got someone to help get you out of the woods. But otherwise, if you're out there alone, there's certain things you can do to survive or to minimize the chances of an attack. Bear spray, always have bear spray with you. If you're comfortable carrying a firearm, have that as well. And I think it's key to practice with those. You need to constantly be pulling your bear spray out of the holster, pulling the safety clip out. And even if you have an old bear spray, practice shooting it, know what it feels like. Do that over and over again until it becomes muscle memory. And then if you're in that situation where a bear is attacking you, instead of like panicking at the last second, tripping over yourself or running, you just automatically muscle memory, pull your bear spray, pull it out, you're ready to go. You didn't even think about it. And that's what happened in my situation. I didn't think about pulling my bear spray. All of a sudden I just did and had it in my hand ready to go. Had I not done that, I would have had maybe a second or two to try to get it all together and probably would never even have sprayed her. She would have probably attacked me before I could have got it ready. So I think that's key. Same thing with the firearm. Practice, train, know how to use it, be ready for any situation. Run it through your mind mentally too. Like if I'm out here hiking and a bear attacks me right now, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna survive? How am I gonna get out of here? All those things that just running it over and over in your head are going to help you in that kind of a situation. Another thing would be you don't always have cell service in the mountains. So I carry a PLB, personal locating beacon, and having one of those on you, it reaches satellites, and in an emergency situation where you can't hike out of the woods, you push the button and you can have search and rescue or emergency services there in no time. Another thing would be just paying attention to your awareness in the woods. When you're out there hiking, don't be looking at your feet all the time. Be looking out in front of you, around you. Know what your surroundings. You know, if there's a carcass on the side of the trail and there's a grizzly bear on it, you want to see it from a distance and get out of there. You don't want to walk up to it suddenly and be in that bear's space. Look at tracks. Look at scat. You know, if you've got fresh grizzly tracks on the trail, then maybe this is a time you would leave, not hike that trail. Or bear scat, at least you know what's in the area. And also sound. You know, people wear their earbuds and their headphones all the time hiking and listening to their favorite tune, but you can't hear what's going on around you. You can't hear a bear sneaking in on you or growling at you or snapping its jaws in the brush or a mountain lion coming in behind you. So just that situational awareness when you're out there in the woods is a key to survival as well and avoiding a bad situation. Other things in surviving in the outdoors would be what's in your survival backpack. You want to have a knife, you want to have duct tape for bandaging wounds or making a splint. You need a flashlight with extra batteries. You might want to have your matches or a lighter in case you need to start a fire and you're injured out there and have to spend the night or cold conditions. Other things to do out there are to be physically and mentally prepared for being out there. I mean, the stronger you are, the more exercise you've done, the better shape you are, the easier it is to survive a bad situation or to get yourself out of the woods if necessary.
Couldn't have said it better myself. For Todd, this event has been a blessing in disguise. As traumatic as it was for him, if anything, it made him closer to nature.
Well, after a number of years since my attack, I don't hate bears. I still think they're very enjoyable to watch and to view and to take photos of from a distance. And, I'm still out in the woods every day enjoying those situations. It hasn't scared me out of the woods. I love the outdoors. That's something I'm always going to do. This bear I was in her space or close enough that she was uncomfortable. She had cubs that she was protecting, and some bears are more aggressive than others, and that's just the situation. I survived it. I got through it. I'm glad I didn't shoot her, and kill her, because there had been 2 abandoned cubs. It just reminds me of, being prepared and ready for whatever might happen if it comes again. Hopefully not, but I'm not going to change my life because of that one situation.
While Todd's resilience and quick thinking helped him stay alive, it was courage and protective gear that saved someone else on a haunting fishing trip. And to no surprise, after hearing this story, a lot of you were quick to point out how dangerous the ocean can be. Yeah, I'm never going in the ocean again after watching that. No matter how beautiful and inviting the sea looks, stay the hell on the beach and enjoy the view. And I can't blame you guys. Especially in Australia, known for its crocs, box jellyfish, and blue-ringed octopus, they can all kill you within seconds. Of course, we can't forget about their sharks. This man managed to see inside the darkness of a shark's mouth and miraculously survived. January 23rd, 2007, off the southern coast of New South Wales, Australia, 41-year-old Eric Nerhus and his son Mark were diving for abalone shellfish in the chilly waters off Cape Howe. Visibility underwater was poor that day, something Eric knew was a risk. With his son manning the boat, Eric strapped on his gear and entered the murky waters. Everything was going to plan, until the unexpected happened.
1 second it was daylight, the next second everything went black.
That's how Eric described the moment he was ambushed by a great white shark. He didn't see it coming, quite literally. That's because, in an instant, his entire head and shoulders were in the great white's mouth, and his arm was down its throat.
The head in a seal is the working end of a critter, and sharks know that much. If they can bite off the head, the rest of it's an easy meal.
Everything went black. I started to get shaken horizontally. I was getting eaten alive.
When a shark head shakes, what it's doing is dragging its teeth, especially its upper teeth, through the prey from side to side like this, and sawing through the prey.
As he was thrashed back and forth underwater, Eric did the unthinkable. Some reports say he grabbed his abalone chisel and stabbed the shark in the eye. Others, including Eric himself, say he gouged it with his bare fingers. Either way, it worked. The shark let go, but only for a moment. It came back and bit him again, this time clamping down on his torso. Miraculously, his lead-weight vest absorbed most of the damage, possibly saving his life. Eric made it back to the surface where his son, who had been waiting on the boat, pulled him aboard. He was rushed to hospital with massive injuries after being bitten twice by a great white shark, but luckily survived. His story went viral, not just for the horror, but for the absurdity of surviving a headfirst bite. Most people don't. Being trapped in a shark's mouth is one thing, but being buried in rubble for 17 days with little to no food or water in the scorching heat is another battle altogether. Our final story speaks not only to an individual's fight for survival, but the role a whole community can play. Shout out to all the people that just started digging by hand, true heroes of society. Seriously, I think that was just an incredible story of people coming together. Rana Plaza collapsed in under 90 seconds, killing over 1,000 workers. 17 days later, rescuers pull a survivor from the rubble. This is the incredible story of Reshma Begum. Warning, this story contains graphic depictions of mass casualties and severe injury. Viewer discretion is advised.
The building is going to collapse and they make us work until midnight.
I had only moved a few feet when I fell and a beam came down on my legs. I was screaming for 2 days. They said, to save you, we will have to cut off your legs. And I said, cut them off, because I want to live to see my children.
What we would also discover is the disaster that happened here was no accident.
On the morning of April 24th, 2013, thousands of people walked into a death trap. Just one day before, this poorly built 8-story building had been evacuated. Garment workers had seen the cracks in the walls, stared with horror at the fatal structural flaws that threatened to send thousands of tons of concrete and metal crushing down on their heads. But the factory owner had one message: get back to work or lose 1 month's pay. Poor and struggling to survive, they felt they had no other choice. At 8:45 a.m., they were at their stations, sewing clothes for best-selling Western fast fashion brands. But just minutes later, their worst fears came true. In 90 seconds, the 8-story garment factory in Dhaka, Bangladesh, became a deadly pile of rubble. 2,500 people were pulled from the wreckage with shattered bodies and missing limbs. It's the deadliest accidental structural collapse in recorded history. But was it really an accident? Engineers had measured the cracks in the load-bearing walls. Its owner, Sohel Rana, knew his building had been condemned in everything but name. And that morning, while his workers were being crushed alive, he was packing his bag. Today, amid this preventable tragedy, we uncover an unbelievable miracle: the story of Reshma Begum. Reshma survived 17 days, entombed, no real food, barely any water, and no way of knowing that anyone was coming to save her. What nightmares did she and the other survivors witness? How did one rescuer save a life, but accidentally end 2 others? And why did some people try to convince the world that Reshma's survival was a hoax? This is the story of the Rana Plaza collapse, a catastrophe that could have been prevented, and of a fast fashion industry that put profit ahead of human life. For 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, Reshma faced a bleak and unrelenting task: sewing garments to satisfy the fashion whims of Western consumers at cut-rate stores like Zara, Joe Fresh, and Walmart.
She sewed pocket seams, 150 pockets an hour.
And for all that grueling work, a meager wage. 400 takas, or about $60 a month. So for mere pennies an hour, Reshma would put her life on the line. At 22, she embodied the struggle of so many. The typical Bangladeshi garment worker is female, 23 years old, an internal migrant living with family in miserable conditions. And she and her fellow employees knew that Rana Plaza wasn't safe. On April 23rd, cracks appeared in the walls of the factory, and the workers scrambled out in fear.
We heard there are some cracks, and they said to go now and come back at 2 p.m.
Are you scared?
Of course we're scared.
Constructed illegally with poor quality iron rods and cement, on a filled-in swamp, designed for retail, not manufacturing, with 4 additional floors added after the fact, illegally, with another one literally in the works, owned by its corrupt namesake, Sohel Rana. You might be asking yourself, how could this happen? The answer is simple and infuriating: corruption. Building owners like Sohel use bribery, wealth, and political connections to skirt laws, regulations, or pressure officials into approving unsafe construction. Following the discovery of the cracks in the foundation, local engineers ordered an evacuation. For a brief moment, reason prevailed.
Then he called the engineer who came and looked at the pillar.
How was the pillar? Show me.
The pillar was a little bit bent. This is not a crack. There is a beam and plaster came off the beam.
The very next morning, workers were ordered back inside. Terrified about losing their wages or jobs, they complied.
They said, "Don't worry, nothing will happen. If you die, we will die too." But they didn't go inside. They made us start work and then left.
With a deafening roar, the 8th floor fell into the 7th, which both annihilated the 6th, pancaking the structure one floor after another, all the way down. In just 90 seconds, 3,100 people became smothered in twisted metal and concrete.
Less than 24 hours after these women expressed their fears, they were crushed to death, along with over 1,000 others.
Reshma Begum had one thought: run. So she raced for a stairwell, dust clouding her vision, threatening to clog her lungs. Terrified, trapped in the pitch black, with dehydration looming, Reshma's journey of survival was just beginning. Before we dive into her incredible story, if you're enjoying the show, it would mean so much to us to have your support so we could keep making meaningful videos like this one. We'd love it if you could hit the bell icon, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments with us. We're always looking to improve to make you guys the best possible survival documentaries out there. Now, back to the show. It took 90 seconds for Rana Plaza to collapse, and for Reshma to find herself in relative safety, in an open space near a prayer room. That is, after she managed to cut her long hair to free herself from the rubble.
I couldn't sit up because there was no space.
All around her, muffled shrieks of pain. And then, a terrifying silence. And as the temperatures increased, so did the smell of decomposing flesh.
When I regained consciousness, my head really hurt and I couldn't move it. I could hear people shouting, "Save me." I heard a man called Alamin. He was in a lot of pain and he asked for water. I said, "Brother, I don't have any water. How can I give you any?" Then he was shouting and crying about his feet. Then he was quiet. I touched him and he felt cold. I think he had died. There was an unbearable smell.
So how did Reshma survive? First, she found dried food scattered about in bags. And then she conserved it, eating the bare minimum. Then she secured fresh air by forcing a broken pipe through a crack, breathing shallowly to avoid fatal carbon monoxide poisoning. She also rationed water, which she managed to conserve even after she ran out of food. And then there is the intangible power of hope, which Reshma held onto as the rescuers all around her fought to extract lives, and all too often bodies, from the rubble, all while the Bangladeshi government refused life-saving emergency support from the United Nations. Immediately, local residents descended on the scene. 8 stories of highly unstable rubble was piled on a plot of land about twice the size of a basketball court.
I reached around 0918 hours
And as I could see, people, hundreds and thousands. No fire brigade and nothing. It is people, the laborers, the market people, those who were in the street. They all came running in thousands to rescue those who were trying to escape the debris. The building collapsed like a pancake.
Forget emergency gear, respirators, and heavy machinery. During this first wave, many wore only plastic sandals and worked with their bare hands. Fabric was torn into rescue ropes. Emergency workers would arrive as well, and as the world watched in horror, officials in Bangladesh made a mind-boggling decision. They refused help.
Bangladesh turned down foreign help, which the UN says had been offered.
It was like a grave. There was no light or air around me, just 3 dead bodies. One on this side and one on my leg and one over there. I pulled it towards me and rested my head on it. Though it was a corpse, I wasn't scared.
As the minutes, hours, and days ticked by, all around Reshma, people slowly died of crush syndrome. This results in muscle necrosis. Essentially, your muscles die, which can lead to multi-organ failure. It's absolutely brutal, guys. Others succumb to the long-term impact of inhaling clouds of toxic dust. Enraged, grieving family and friends clashed with police, who responded with tear gas. Rescuers were on their own and faced with heart-rending decisions. Imagine yourself in their place. The heat is stifling. You've probably already lost friends or family, but you press on, determined not to let someone else suffer the same outcome. You scratch and claw at rubble and dirt. You grab a loose piece of rebar or scrap of iron to use as leverage because you hear a voice. And then that voice calling out to you connects to a face, a living, breathing person. For now. But they're pinned down, a limb caught beneath a massive slab of immovable concrete. What do? Wait? Surely they won't survive. Call for help? None is coming. Your government made sure of that. Faced with that impossible choice, they decide to operate, though that term hardly captures what happened.
I was screaming for 2 days. Then some people reached me. They said, to save you, we will have to cut off your legs. And I said, cut them off because I want to live to see my children. They gave me an injection, but it still hurt so much. And I started screaming loudly. They said, if you scream, we are going to leave you here. Then they cut off my right leg. The pain was unbelievable. Then I started screaming again. This time they said, if you keep screaming, we will not cut off your other leg. I said, okay, brother, I'm not going to scream. Take my leg off.
I mean, that's absolutely insane. Now, to be clear, not every rescuer was working with their bare hands. There was the odd excavator, bulldozer, or crane. And some did have cutting tools. Saws fitted with blades to slice through stone and steel, which undoubtedly saved lives, but in one bitter twist of fate, ended them. Why? Because it wasn't just what the building was constructed with that turned deadly. It was what was inside the complex as well. Mountains of highly combustible, cheap synthetic fabric, clothing labels, and textile dust turned the disaster zone into a tinderbox. On April 28th, 4 days into the tragedy, rescuers were no longer finding survivors. That was until they discovered Shaheen Akhtar. Scrambling to free her, sparks flew from a saw and ignited a fire, killing Akhtar and fatally burning a rescue worker. 16 days have now passed since the collapse. Hopes of finding the living have all but vanished. Heavy machinery that could have crushed survivors moves in. But somewhere deep below, Reshma Begum finds a metal pipe, a simple object that would help grant her freedom. As bulldozers and cranes cleared debris, a serviceman from the Bangladeshi army strained to hear any survivors still buried in the rubble. Somehow, amidst the clamor, he heard a faint sound. A rhythmic tapping, metal against stone. Frantically, they called off the heavy machines. They needed silence. Tap, tap, tap. They plunged into the dark, flashlights blazing, handsaws and welding tools cutting metal in two. Down they went. Then, a weak voice called out from the void.
I didn't think anybody could save me. Then I heard the call to prayer and I saw some dim light from outside. I was shouting, "Brother, is there anybody out there? Please save me." I was shouting for a long time. Nobody came. Then some soil fell on my head. Suddenly, there was shouting above me. Sir, I think there is someone alive here." They called my name, "Reshma, Reshma, take this light." When I got the light, I realized I had lost most of my clothes and I didn't want them to take me out like this. With the torch, I found something to wear and put it on. Then I waited.
It took another 40 minutes of painstaking work to free Reshma. Live television broadcasts beamed the ordeal to all corners of the globe. And when she was finally pulled into the daylight, Reshma was still able to walk. The crowd roared. Her survival was nothing short of a miracle. Paramedics administered oxygen to her struggling lungs, saline to restore her organs that had been fighting dehydration. A note about dehydration: it works in stages, starting with thirst, when 2% of your body weight is lost. Your kidneys send less water to your bladder. You sweat less, your body temperature rises, and to keep enough oxygen in your system, your heart rate picks up. Stage 2 is fatigue. Your head starts to hurt. You lose focus. Then comes dizziness, lightheadedness, and extremely dry skin. At this point, water isn't enough. You need electrolytes. From there, the symptoms become severe. Low blood pressure, loss of consciousness, fever, serious pain, organ failure, and death. In the end, over 2,000 people were pulled from the wreckage. 1,134 of them were dead, making the Rana Plaza the deadliest accidental building collapse in history.
Maybe I'm scared. People say, "You are a brave girl, why don't you want to work in a factory?" I say, "I won't return to the factory."
And while Reshma's ordeal became a symbol of hope, it also became a chance for cynical operators to co-opt her story for their own gain. A conspiracy began to form. One male co-worker said he and Reshma had escaped together the day the building fell, that they spent 17 days together in the hospital, before she reappeared on television. An opposition newspaper spun the same tale, saying a landlady claimed Reshma had escaped on day 1. Anti-government activists said authorities staged her rescue as a distraction. A so-called investigative reporter highlighted alleged physical inconsistencies. Her sari was clean, her hands and fingernails undamaged, her eyes unaffected by the sun after weeks underground. For her part, Reshma rejected these claims as nonsense, saying, "Where I was, you were not there, so you have no idea." Her mother did too. Following Reshma's statement, the Bangladeshi military banned further questions from the press. But for the fast fashion industry that put Reshma's life at risk and took the lives of so many others, the questions were just beginning. So, would anyone be held responsible for this horror? Would the fast fashion industry be forced to change? Or would Western consumers continue to casually enjoy the fruits of the deadly labor performed half a world away? And what about the long-term damage done to the survivors themselves? Reshma was given a job as a public area ambassador at a local Westin hotel, but her life was by no means easy. Other young women had no choice but to return to the industry that took so much from them. As for the owner, Sohail Rana, he tried to avoid accountability the old-fashioned way, by running for the hills, only to be caught en route to India.
Building owner Mohammed Sohail Rana has appeared in court over the worst industrial accident in Bangladesh history. He was arrested on Sunday whilst trying to flee the country.
Rana was convicted of corruption and sentenced to just 3 years in prison. However, he and 37 others do face additional murder charges that could result in the death penalty. Those cases are tied up in court as authorities hear from hundreds of witnesses. The industry at large had to be dragged kicking and screaming to make amends. After 2 years of relentless campaigning, they established a $30 million victim compensation fund. Other changes came more quickly. Agreements on safe work conditions and inspections, legally binding accords between brands and trade unions. But deadly workplace accidents persist. In April of 2026, a fire at a Bangladeshi lighter factory killed 5. And as lives continue to be lost, the Rana Plaza sculpture of two clenched fists wielding the worker's hammer and sickle is a stark reminder of the price still being paid. None of these survivors expected these things to happen to them. Todd had hiked those woods many times, untouched. Eric was focused on shellfish. Julianne and Vesna boarded flights expecting to reach their destination. Reshma, Harrison, and Christopher all thought it'd be just another day at work. But their ability to stay calm and get a handle on the situation put them all in the best position to make it out alive. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As you guys can see, I read them, so be nice. If you want to hear about another incredible survival story, check out our video on Shishko Gracia. While exploring an underwater cave, things took a turn for the worse. Shishko had to spend 60 hours in an air pocket, hoping he would be rescued. It's yet another story of a human's will to survive. We'll see you next time on another episode of How to Survive.